statements. We'll hear the first opening statement from Ms. Franks on behalf of the state, and we will hear the next opening statement from Mr. Meyer on behalf of the defense. Ms. Franks?
Thank you. Reginald Day is a 46-year-old male. He had met the defendant, Crystal Mangum, who at the time was a 32-year-old female. They had begun a new relationship. You're going to hear evidence that it only lasted for a few weeks. And then came the night of April 3rd, 2011. You're going to hear evidence that Reginald Day and Crystal went to a party at a relative's house of Mr. Day's, and that he rode to that party with Hassan Wilson, and Hassan Wilson brought him back to that party. You're also going to hear evidence that once Mr. Day and the defendant were in their apartment, an argument ensued. And during that argument, you're going to hear evidence that the defendant took a knife and stabbed Mr. Day. And after stabbing Mr. Day, he went out of the house, went to his cousin's apartment, and immediately told him what happened. He was extremely upset, in a lot of pain, and bleeding a lot from his wound. You're going to hear evidence that the defendant left the residence at some point, went over to another person's house where her 3 children were residing, and just stayed there. You're going to hear evidence that she called 911 only after talking to other people before she did that, and then hung up without getting any detailed information to let the police know how to get to the victim. You're going to hear evidence that Mr. Day went into the hospital on that date. He had surgery, and 10 days later, as a result of that knife wound and complications from that knife wound, he died. This case, you're going to hear evidence from the defense as to a self-defense claim. You're going to hear a lot of facts in this case. It's all going to come from this witness stand here. You're going to hear a lot of details. An opening statement is just to give you a brief forecast, and that's what this is, just a brief forecast, because each one of you need to listen to each person that gets up here and testifies and look at each piece of evidence that gets entered into evidence before you make your decision. So please listen very, very carefully. Now, in following this case, because of the time of the year and because some of the witnesses have since left their employment and are now out of state, it may not go chronologically. It may not flow. The state will be putting on witnesses out of order. And that's another reason. Please listen very carefully, because a witness that normally might not be called toward the end of a trial may be called earlier due to the availability. And then the vice versa of that, a witness that is normally called early may be called later. So it's very important that you listen to each piece and keep track of it, because at the end of the trial, the state's going to come back to you and ask you to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and not find that she acted in self-defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Franks. Mr. Meyer, on behalf of the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We don't disagree with everything the state said, but there is evidence that you will be hearing that the state didn't tell you. Yes, on the night of April 3rd, after they returned from a party, when they had been drinking, they got into an argument. What you will hear, and you will hear this from Mr. Day as he told to others. This is Mr. Day's version of what happened. They got into an argument, either over some money or because she was disrespecting him. One of the two. He says it both ways. At one point she went to leave, you'll hear that evidence, and he locked the door. He wanted her to stay in to be calm. Then they continued to argue. Then this is his statements. These come from him. She then said she was going to leave, and he held her down on the bed until she calmed down, and because she was disrespecting him. Again, the arguments continued. They were again arguing, and again he says, I wanted her out. She goes into a bathroom, locks the door, and he believes she's calling a police officer to come pick her up. You'll hear all of this. What does he do in response to that? He kicks the door down, rips it off its frame, goes into the bathroom, grabs Miss Mangum by the hair, drags her into the bedroom, and then at that point, somewhere within a little bit of time on that, he gets stabbed a single time in the side. This all comes from Mr. Day himself. He admits 3 separate times keeping her from going. He admits to kicking the door down. Now he will say repeatedly, you will hear repeatedly, I never hit her. I held her down, I drug her by her hair, but I never hit her. After he was stabbed, yes, he left and goes to his nephew's house. She leaves and goes to a neighbor's house. She calls some people, then she calls 911 in tears. She hangs up, then her son calls 911 and explains what happened. At the same time, Mr. Day's nephew is calling 911. Mr. Day is taken to Duke University Medical Center for a single stab wound to the side and is treated surgically. The knife wound nicked the colon, successful surgery the morning of April 3rd. Full recovery is expected. All of these things, as you're asking yourself, how did the officers, where do we get the statements? You'll hear from April 3rd to April 6th, he was talking, he was in pain, he was recovering, but things seemed to be going well. Unfortunately, on April 6th, for reasons that we may get into, he had low oxygen saturation. They went to intubate, lack of oxygen to the brain. He ultimately ended up dying. As a result of that, he became brain dead. A week later, they took him off life support. But we do ask each of you to keep an open mind and do listen to the evidence and listen to all of the evidence and especially listen to what Mr. Day himself says happened. I wanted her out, but 3 separate times she tried to leave, and I kicked the door down and drug her by her hair after doing so when she was attempting to call someone to pick her up. Again, listen to all the evidence, understand the state has the burden, please take it in that regard. At the end of the day, we are going to ask you to find my client not guilty for reason of self-defense, that she had a reasonable response to the incidents of that evening. And we are going to try to ask you, there's going to be a lot of information about a lot of other evenings. Focus on the incidents of that evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Evidence for the state?
Yes, sir. The state would call Hassan Wilson.